Hi there, and welcome to this edition of Leaders Live. If you haven't joined us before, welcome, thank you very much. And if you're part of our community, thank you very much for continuing to support us. We really do appreciate your time and willingness to come and watch our shows. Today, we're talking about crisis as a catalyst for innovation. What is next for health tech? And I'm particularly excited about this one because it's the first time we've done anything around health technology. And I think there is lots and lots to talk about, particularly given everything that's happened with the COVID pandemic over the past 12 to 18 months. We've got an amazing panel of guests from startups to established organizations who are going to be talking about how health tech is transforming, particularly over the past 12 months. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Doron Himo, who is the head of the Economic Trade Mission in Europe for the Ministry of Economy for Israel. And I would also like to thank Robert Bosch, who are also supporting this event today. We're joined by a number of amazing guests, including Shai Melkler, who is the CEO of Biohouse, and Shai is going to be hosting this event today. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Shai for the rest of the show.
Thank you, Helen. Hello, everyone. My name is Shai Melkler. I'm the CEO of Biohouse. We're a platform that promotes startups in the medical field on a global level. And we're here today with Angela Rabinovich and Ronen Savossi and Dr. Dominic Alsher from Robert Bosch Hospital. We're going to let them introduce themselves in a minute. I want to thank you all for joining and participating, and I want to thank all the viewers on YouTube for following us. So I would like to start with a very short introduction, starting with you, Angela. We'll take about half a minute to introduce yourself. We'll go around and see who's who. Please.
Great. Thank you for having me at the Leaders Live today, and thank you for this great start. And I'm Angela Rabinovich. I'm leading the strategy and the business growth at Innovitech Medical Solutions. We are in the emergency field and pre-hospital. We'll describe a little bit later specifically about the technology. I'm just joined the company in the recent years, following over 15 years in the business development and sales operations in the digital health and medical device companies, and also as a government servant recently working on to the benefit of the Israeli industry abroad. So I'm looking for the exciting events today. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you. Ronen, a word about yourself?
Hi, hello, I'm Ronen. I'm the CEO and founder of NanoSono. NanoSono is an Israeli company that has developed and developing several types of technologies and products to prevent the spread of infections and the spread of pandemics, mainly in the area of nanotechnology and sophisticated materials. The company was established about 6 years ago. Before it, I was served for about 10 years for Teva Pharmaceutical in all the areas of pharma development, validations, technologies, and production of pharmaceutical products. I'm happy to be here at the event. Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Dominic, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks, John. My name is Dominic Alsher. I'm a medical doctor. I'm the chief executive doctor here of the Robert Bosch Hospital and CEO. The Robert Bosch Hospital is in South Germany. We have about 1,000 beds, and we are well known for our research branch, mainly in clinical pharmacology, but also in other technologies, all in the sense of translation, bringing the best to the bed of the patients. And I'm looking forward to discuss the topics here together with all of you.
Thank you very much. So we've been through quite a year, and we're here to discuss how a pandemic and an emergency situation like we have experienced affects the way innovation in healthcare and medical technologies takes place and is affected by such a phenomenon. So what I'd like to do, we're all here for a reason, what I'd like to do is to take about 5 minutes with Angela and Ronen for you to describe the companies you represent and where you see yourself in medical technologies at large. And later on, we'll go into how this year has affected you. So Angela, let's start with you, a little bit about Innovitech.
Yeah, shortly about Innovitech. As just mentioned, our roots actually in the field of pre-hospital medicine, in the EMS and tactical medicine for the military corps. So we've designed and manufactured medical solutions to really superior medical solutions to put in the hands of paramedics. As you know, they are working in ever-changing environments, in the unexpected situations, so they might be able to handle any challenge thrown their way. So you can actually, you have been staffed with adequate equipment. And that's how Innovitech well known in this ecosystem with its vent sterile, which is very unique ventilation machine. It's probably the only one in the category of the ultralight ventilation. I just also might be able to show you. So it's just 1 kilogram ventilator, so the paramedic can easily work with it and to administer the ventilation to the patient at any kind of setting. As what happened actually is during the last year also we found out that such an intuitive technology were taken onto the in-hospital routine medical procedures, because during the pandemic, what happened is that the first line caregivers were found not necessarily out of hospital, but within the hospital. And that's how it's totally transformed what company is doing today and how we are looking on our future in terms of what our focus is. And also Innovitech developed, again, due to the fact that we are coming with extended experience of what are requirements at medical emergencies. So we developed a tool, goes by the name of Sally, like Save Lives, to put in the hands of a community member, which might be able to provide a care for their families members, for their friends, for just any person that they seeing are going any kind of physical distress, and that's to buy really a time, a crucial minutes before the professional emergency team arrives on the scene. So those are technologies that we are looking on to develop even further, and I'll be happy to share a little bit later about how it changed all around the company's focus.
Sounds fascinating and definitely relevant. Ronen, a little bit about Nanosono.
Yes, sure, thank you. Nanosono, as I mentioned before, is a nanotechnology company, and what we actually are doing are developing sophisticated materials and also combining them with sophisticated other types of technology from biology, polymers, light, and so on. All of them to serve a purpose of preventing the spread of infection. That means technologies that will destroy bacteria and destroy viruses on any types of products, surfaces, and so on. And also, it's not only the technology, it's taking the cutting edge technology and bringing them fastly down into products. So on the bottom line, what we have are several types of antibacterial or bactericidal bandages, bactericidal paints. That means you can paint the wall and the wall will destroy the coronavirus immediately and destroy bacteria immediately, yeast and mold immediately, and so on. We have antibacterial filters. We have ointments, a face mask, and many other types of personal protective equipment. All of them are, the purpose of them is to create a protection cycles on the human being and the patient in hospitals. In that way, we believe that we can prevent the spread of infections and reduce the use of antibiotic. And antibiotic, we are talking about COVID-19, but the COVID-19 is a wake-up call for us, or is the foreplay for the real pandemic that can occur, that can be from a resistant bacteria, which will be much more destructive and much more painful. And this is what we should be ready for, preventing the spread of resistant bacteria and other types of contaminations with technologies that are not based on antibiotics.
So thank you, Onan. So actually, what you just did is you actually started our discussion by presenting NanoSono, and this is a very interesting question. I'm pretty sure that when NanoSono set out, a pandemic type virus was not your main goal, and it leads me to the question: since many ventures go after the antibacterial solutions that do not involve antibiotics, it's like a very big race. What was the point in the beginning of the pandemic where you found yourself innovating your own technology towards a new target? When did, from antibacterial, did you find yourself becoming an antiviral product?
Yes, this was quite a moment for me and for the company. It's actually it's happened when the pandemic started at December 2019. I actually came. I think I was the last flight from China to Israel, and then I heard in the news about this kind of pandemic that started. And I asked myself. I was focused on bacteria infections, and I was not focused on all kinds of viruses spread prevention. And this is something that I understood immediately, that I have to do some sort of a shift in the company and in development of the company, and to start addressing the technology towards the other type of infection, which is viruses. So immediately what we have done is see all types of tests, establishing a virus lab here at NanoSano, hiring people who are experts in viruses, and start developing new types of materials that will be addressed directly to prevention of the spread of viruses. This is the immediate actions that I did, and we are still working on it. It's a long process, but this is something that I understood that it goes together with other types of infections prevention.
Yeah, sounds great. And Angela, your product is more of a symptom addressing product, and you obviously developed your line and your marketing strategies regardless of any given pandemic. Where did this meet you? How did your product innovate, if at all? How did your company sprout innovation during this process?
Indeed, we were very focused as a company, as an R&D, first of all, company, on making technology really superior for very specific need. And, you always learn, definitely in the economics, your strategy, you have to be focused, and then you might maybe gain the most of value for your stakeholders in terms of the end users and patient and the company. But when we then, prior the pandemic, we considered the pre-hospital, our focus, the emergency, and of course the respiratory failures and the ability to ventilate the patient. And once the pandemic hit, so we realized that we should define our focus in a very different way, because the greater challenge become a transportation of ventilated patient and the mobility of in a safe mode of ventilated patients. So once you are focusing onto the patient that is being ventilated and have to be transferred or have to be mobile, then you apparently found yourself and found your potential end user not only in pre-hospital, but much greatly within the hospital and definitely within the home-based environment. And then you realize the great world of potential end user that can benefit of your device in a different way. So definitely requirements are different. In the military, standards are different. EMS ambulances and air ambulances standards are different. And in hospital, you have to offer a device which is MRI compatible, because you have to take a respiratory patient onto the MRI chamber and then to take it back, and being able to move to make this transportation very smooth and safe. And you have to make your device talking with the nurse station. So you have to introduce connectivity onto the device, and you have to make it just kind of overnight in the speed of a life, I would say, during the pandemic. And then you have to dispatch the patients as soon as you're able from the hospital to home if they are not COVID related, but for example, they are ALS patient or other patient after the surgery that might be in a much safer environment in home, but they have to be ventilated. So then your device should talk with the caregivers, which are not necessary the respiratory therapy. So all the user interface of your device should be different at all. And then you appear after a year of such enormous work and really on an extreme daily routine that you, instead of a one device, you have a portfolio of 4 devices, like a family of products that you serve a population of different end users. And that's how we describe, again, from the very beginning of what the mission of your company. It's really support a ventilated patient at their quality of life, either in hospital or at home, and provide the greater mobility because, the next behind of us, I mean, the ventilator just weighed 5 kilograms and you are able to offer it just in a 1 kilogram, which is independent from the oxygen, it's independent from the electricity. So you can imagine the convenience of really consume care at where you are. You don't need to be connected to specific infrastructure. So
Right.
that's
So I think that's a very important remark. I think that we've seen many developments and innovations throughout the COVID time that focus on home care and moving the center of the patient-related activities from the medical center to the home, because you just get people out of the center, number one, and reduce the stress on the system, et cetera. And Dominic, that brings the healthcare system view into the discussion. You look, at a large volume of patients on a large variety of reasons, and this year was very, very different for you. And you are in touch with new technologies and mainstream technologies, and you see what's new and what's good and what doesn't catch on as well. How did this year catch you at the healthcare system regarding innovation-wise? Procedures, the use of technologies, products, SOPs, et cetera?
Yeah, thanks. The pandemic changed a lot of stuff in our hospital. In the first wave, now almost 1 year ago, the first task we had to accomplish is to bring a point of care system to the patients in the emergency department, to making the precise diagnosis of COVID-19 right away. Because we learned when we don't identify the patients, we got a problem in the whole hospital. So we worked together with companies to find a very fast point of care solutions, and it had to be PCR. So we had to discuss PCRs, how to speed up the whole process, and using this in the emergency department. The second thing was to avoid the transfer of virus in the hospital. So I listened very carefully to the talk of Ronan, and it's extremely important that we also think about how we can really reduce the risk of transfection of virus. But this extends also to other routes, also to bacteria, but also for the virus. So this was the next step we had to discuss. And then we had the problem with respirators. There was a shortage of respirators at the beginning. And Angela, you mentioned that the mobility. Very often we saw that one hospital was overwhelmed by the need to bring people to the respirator. So we had to shift patients from one hospital to the other. And we learned, looking to a whole area, we had enough ICUs, but we had to bring this mobility topic to the people. So we needed to organize transportations. And for that, we need very easy to handle respirators. and there's something other coming into account. Also, we have a shortage of well-educated doctors and nurses to use with respirators. So there was a need for easy to handle respirators. Also here, we work together with others. And so we learned a lot at the first wave. And when the things were changing, we had a second wave now half a year ago. Now we are in the third wave. And the characteristics of the patients are totally different. And also the tasks are totally different. Now we have more younger people in our ICUs because the elderly all got their vaccination shots. So this changed the demographics. And also we see also other organ failures. And also here we need technology. So bringing all this together, I think without technology and without working together with startups and also big companies to accomplish all these tasks, probably it would be much more worse than it was 1 year ago and also now going on. And the second thing regarding technology was the term digitalization. We shifted all internal conferences to digital formats just to reduce the likelihood of getting a transfer of virus from one employee to the next. That was extremely important. And I learned that the system, who is a little bit more conservative normally, the medical system, was very open-minded to adapt very fast with digital solutions. And this was a really big boost for digitalization in the whole health sector. So viel for the beginning. Thanks.
Thank you. That's fascinating. We actually got two views here on how a totally new change of circumstances meets the real world in the healthcare systems and those who develop tools to be used in the real world. And there are two different timelines that are being looked at. And we saw this at Biohouse. Many companies pivoted their products and tried to find the COVID angle. There was a big feeling of urgency, not only the commercial opportunity, and everybody was really getting under the stretcher, as we called it. Ronen, you talked about a very specific process that you made. So I noticed that we need something new. I sat down, I planned it. Do you feel that this process changed something in your organization that will be long-term? I mean, will you be doing innovation in Nanosona in a different way from now on?
Yes, I think yes, certainly, yes. I think that this opened my mind to always explore new things, not to be surprised, which is very important. I must tell that, as I said before, I was surprised by this type of pandemic, which was by viruses and not by bacteria. And this is something that told me, be ready and make the company ready for many types of things. And as I said, the decisions was now we will increase our abilities in the development of technologies in the area of viruses, infection prevention, molecular biology technologies, bioconvergence technologies. I understood right after that in order to prevent more sophisticated problem, I must have the abilities in many aspects of science. That means more abilities in biology, combine the biology with nanotechnology, combine biology with light technology, physics, mathematics, and also artificial intelligence. That means we acquire technologies to do a market research, a data analysis of technologies and possibilities, and the real challenge is how to combine everything together into one piece. This is the real challenge. I think this is the challenge, and also the future to solve complicated problems.
Yeah, so this sounds like a lot of the changes went into product and development and how you do the research before launching a new line. And Angela, you focus more on marketing focus and how your existing product is being administered into the real world. Do you feel that other changes have happened in Innovitech that are long-term, that you will be working differently throughout, not only on marketing strategy, et cetera?
Surely. I think definitely for us, and for many others. This year was kind of a stress test for the company, also internally, because traditionally healthcare used to adapt new practices in a kind of a step-by-step way, and in the recent year we have to fit ourselves onto the different frequency of activities. So what we did on a daily basis, we just you just divide the longer processes onto the short-term missions. You validate the progress much more frequently. You adapt onto the new circumstances, and then you are making this process all around again, and really bring your products more available and more fit onto the routine medical practices, and communicating with the field, with the doctors and with nurses, and collect those insights and bring them back, and again put all those insights onto the R&D team, and then implement them into the device. So definitely it wasn't easy year, but we couldn't be prouder of the results, because I believe it kind of introduced a culture of doing things rapidly and concentrate onto the progress, onto the performance, of course, making things as everything in medical you cannot do without thinking about patient safety and the physician safety also in the time of pandemic. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And back to the trenches, Dominic, from the healthcare system view, I mean, medical systems all over the world have been scrutinized of how they went through this year. How did this meet the Robert Bosch Hospital? How do you feel that innovation or looking at reinventing yourself and how you do things has changed on a long-term basis at the hospital?
Yeah. I mean, there were some lessons we learned during the pandemic. One thing was the process, how we came to decisions. Probably before it was a little bit too complicated and it took too long time. During a pandemic, you must be really only orientated to the results. You must be highly effective. And so we changed all our internal decision making, also in the level of administration, and we shifted it to a process that was able to come to really major decisions in a few hours. An actual decision-making process, and I think that was extremely helpful for all the people. The second thing was we integrated the experts in all these decision-making processes. We organized every day large video conferences. About 40 up to 80 doctors took part in these video conferences, discussed the topic together, and because we were isolated during their normal task, because we tried not to bring the transfer of virus from one employee to the next, but this was an opportunity to discuss also topics around medicine together and to work out decisions. So we had a strong support of our decisions in the whole organizations. I think that was extremely important. And third thing, before, in the past, a lot of innovation in the medicine was produced by the medical profession by themselves. But now, I think in the future, but also during the pandemic, it was extremely important to look out from the medical profession to other avenues of life, to other technologies, to IT, for example, for digitalization, for mathematics, and to use all this technology to solve the problems. So people, especially the medical doctor, had to leave their isolation and looking around. And I think this is a spirit that should we use also in the future to solve the problems who are laying ahead. And maybe this was only one pandemic. We all do not know, but there is some likelihood that we see the next pandemic in near future. So to be prepared to getting to keep this spirit to going out of a profession and looking to others, I think that's extremely important. And here we learned, I think, a lot as an organization.
Yeah, thanks. So in a very natural way, you actually answered the immediate question that comes after that. We've all been through a very intense year, and I think all three of you have touched on the way that it affected your organization. And obviously there was a lot of urgency in using intuition and quickly solving problems and adapting to a new situation. But it was very, very highly intense. And obviously it's not a very viable dynamics for a public organization or a private company, et cetera. But the question is, and I think, Dominic, you gave the healthcare view on that, and I'm wondering what the private sector thinks of how to maintain this type of momentum after we exit the crisis. So we're not in crisis, the next crisis is coming on, but how do you as smaller private or larger public organizations keep this momentum being prepared for the next crisis, not being so shocked when it happens? And just jump in, anyone who has thoughts on how they feel that they're keeping this innovative momentum going forward.
Maybe I can start. For us, the integration of the employees, of the experts in the decision-making process in a very broad sense, I think that is something we want to keep, and also to be very open-minded regarding technology and all the time try to getting a little bit better, to be highly effective. Don't just only rely on old processes, but to discuss every day what we can doing or what can we achieve in a better way. I think this spirit we try to keep on, and if we are available to keep this spirit in the whole organization, I think we have so many changes around us. It's with digitalization, it's migration, it's climate change. So we really, as a system, a small system, but embedded in a large system, must be very open-minded, and we should keep this openness. So we try to keep it with the employees here. So that is now our mission and what we have learned out from a pandemic.
Yeah. Ronan, you touched on bioconvergence as a dogma that you're adopting at Nanosono, but I think we all understand that this has a much wider scope. Do you have any stand on how the entire medical technology industry will be affected by the idea of bioconvergence?
Yes, of course. When you go, if I will divide it into different aspects of bioconvergence, let's speak about nanotechnology. Once you go to the nano level, the laws of physics are beginning to change, or there's a different types of forces in physics that change the properties of the materials. So if you be able to adapt those properties of the materials, you can solve problems that you cannot solve them in other way. If you combine them with other technologies, like polymers technology, light technologies, biological technologies, protein, peptide, and so on, you will be able to create a new device which can answer and solve several types of problems. For example, one of our materials that we are developing is a material that combines properties like antibacterial, hemostatic, pain relief. We can also easily adapt this technology to do other types of properties, like targeting into several types of proteins and so on, diseases or something like this. And also, we can also adapt the forces of infrared, which is light, to enhance the properties of one technology. So if you will combine them together, you can get something which is very interesting. For example, if you will attach a special type of nanomaterial to a contaminated area, and you will light on it, put the light, which is not necessarily need to be UV light, you can get several times over antibacterial efficacy. You will get something like a full sterilization of surface or full sterilization of a certain product. So using nanotechnology, using light, you can create a new device which have very interesting properties, and then you can adapt it to different types of applications. So this is, on a nutshell, what are the opportunities. And as I said before, the challenge is how to combine them all together. And the challenge is because each one of them is a totally different discipline. And this is what interesting.
Yeah, that is a new way of doing research, and I think that more and more companies are joining into that way of thought. And I think that's also where, for instance, the Israeli health tech innovation has found an advantage, a competitive advantage compared to other ecosystems. And Angela, using a more engineered oriented product, less materials. And I think somebody mentioned before the infiltration of use of data and AI, and obviously there's a lot of machine learning and digital health tools that have been discussed. Do you find that that is something that is more relevant to your side of the industry? Have you found that you use those tools a little more? And also from your experience at the Export Institute, maybe you have a wider range, a wider view on health tech at large and the new introduction of these advanced tools digitally. What's your view on how that will affect tomorrow in the health tech industry?
Yeah, I can tell definitely that as all of us witness the great adoption of digital technologies due to the pandemic. And I really hoping that the lessons learned recently, how the digital tools are able to in the areas of either preparedness, public safety, and care coordination, that where actually healthcare system managed to introduce new modality of patient-physician interface. And also new models of reimbursement, probably in kind of ad hoc payment schemes. We all have to see how to actually make it more sustainable in order to keep this momentum of and making it sustainable in a longer term. Because also as an Israeli and we are kind of a digital native nation, so being made a digital transformation like 20 years ago, it doesn't protect you from maybe doing it again in the light of the pandemic, because circumstances are absolutely different. Having a remote consultation as an alternative way, it's pretty different from having it like just the only way to do. And the healthcare system might be able to handle the requirements of patient in a different kind of a scale. So, and it still requires another kind of investment. I believe that what we've seen during the last year, that the aligned and massive funding and adoption and also national attention literally helps to make a transformation very short period of time. So we do need to build onto the pathways and workflows to make it sustainable and to coordinate care, and also technologies that offer automation component, like, for example, AI for radiologists or pathologists, or self-diagnostics in home care environment. All those kind of technologies would help the healthcare system to increase the capacity, and it's absolutely necessary to support care outside the hospital. And I do believe that as also, we on-demand everything during the pandemic. The healthcare now is not an exception any longer, and people do expect to consume care at their convenience, and that's, I believe, would be another push and another incentive to make this transformation sustainable.
Yeah, those are my thoughts, and I'm very curious to hear how the healthcare system deals with these new and exciting tools. But we'll take a second for our YouTube viewers to notice that there's a question out there waiting for your Mentimeter results. Do you think the pandemic has accelerated technological development in healthcare? It's a yes or no question, or you don't know. So do address that, and we'll get back to the results in a minute. Dominic, the healthcare system, it really has a plethora of tools being offered to it in the digital scale, with decision support systems, better monitoring, reorganizing how you do remote and on-site healthcare. But the feeling is that there might be a gap between what is offered and what may be adopted. There's a gap that is maybe regulatory, maybe culturally, maybe different in the approach. How did Robert Bosch Hospital meet these tools and feel that they are really available and good to use?
Yeah, that's an important issue. I mean, altogether, we have a funding problem of our traditional healthcare sectors in the Western world. It's too expensive, especially the hospitals, and we must work better together, also integrating the out-of-hospital care with the hospitals. So we must think more into networks, and digitalization helps to bring the data from one sector to the next sector. That's one issue. And you are totally right. What we see is that we have some barriers against the use of a wide use of all digital solutions which are available. And it's sometimes the regulatory stuff that really prevent doctors to use all the stuff that is available. But sometimes it's also a cultural thinking of medical doctors who are a little bit conservative in use of digital tools. And I think the pandemic is something like an accelerator for the whole process. Without digitalization, without integrating the sectors each to the next sector, and when we're not able to take the whole patient journey through the different sectors by data handling together, I mean, when we are all the time losing information, we are wasting resources. So I think that's one of the major topics we have to address in the near future. And I'm quite convinced that tools like also respirators must be embedded in a digital process. Decision making, and when we are able to use AI, for example, to bring also some burden away from doctors to machines, then probably we are able to keep the high quality of our healthcare, but by lower costs in the long run. So I think that's one of the major tasks we have to accomplish in the near future. And my feeling is that the pandemic was a booster for all these necessary processes we have to accomplish in the next future.
Thank you. So before we take Q&A from our viewers, actually, what you said now is very important because you talk about the differences in culture and the conservatism of the healthcare providers. And I'm pretty sure that this varies from country to country. And being global by nature, this pandemic really aroused a lot of comparisons between different nations, different cultures, different continents, even weathers and how they affect the dynamics. What do you feel as part of the healthcare system was the difference and the effect of the difference between approaches taken by different countries to deal with this pandemic on the healthcare scope?
Yeah, I think quite important was the transparency of information at the beginning, because when you have a problem, you need a much data about the problem. You need all available information about it. So transparency of information is something quite important. And different countries have different approaches how to handle the information. I think that was some distinction between how countries were handling the whole process. The second thing is the healthcare sector, how it is organized. When you are a country with at the main with a public health sector, with only few insurance companies, for example, and with a broad digitalization of the whole processes, it's much more easier to bring solutions into the whole society. When it's more private organized, your healthcare sector, it's a little bit more complicated and it takes time to bring solutions to all patients in a very broad approach. So I think here countries with a public health sector, not too much fragmented in different insurance companies, we were the front runners also, for example, for the whole vaccination process. And this is a next major difference. And the third thing is access to resources and also money. I mean, we have a lot of countries in this world who are far away from vaccination because they don't have the resources, they don't have the money, and they don't have access to the whole stuff. So also here, it's also a matter of resources. And what we now see is in the whole world, when we look to the whole globe together, it's a very scattered process how countries were handling the whole pandemic. And maybe with digitalization, with broader use of technology, we can a little bit bring it to also other countries, the major advantages how to fight this pandemic. So also here from a political point of view, I think we can really learn a lot of stuff.
Okay, and so I see we have a resounding yes regarding acceleration of technology, and I'm wondering, Angela and Ronen, what are your thoughts? You're promoting existing products and new products into different markets. Have you noticed on your side as private product pushers, we'll call it, different between different philosophies during this year? Did you feel that?
Yes. I think that it's obvious that the world before the pandemic and after the pandemic would not be the same. There will be a lot of changes in many aspects, and we see them today. One of them we spoke about is the digital health, which got a huge boost in this period, and I think it's very important that this was the catalyst for this thing. Other things that are going to be changed, that the approach of governments and countries towards all personal protective equipment. I don't know if you remember, during the peak of the pandemic, there was a huge shortage of personal protective equipment. And I understand from officials that they now address it as a national resource. That means that every country now wants its own abilities to control the personal protective equipment. Not everything will be produced by China and so on, or countries like this. Of course, the awareness towards infection prevention, this is related to nanosono. During the peak of the pandemic, I personally would witness a tsunami of mails and approaches starting from government officials all around the world, huge companies. All of them want technologies to prevent the spread of infections. Of course, now it's dropped down, but instead of getting 10 mails a day, now we're getting 1 mail a day. But still, it's very interesting. That means that those kind of changes will be with us in the next decades or more. And I think that they will be part of our life.
So thank you. We have our second question for the viewers out there. And Angela, I'll get to you in a minute with an interesting question we got from the viewers. So first of all, on the Mentimeter, do you think the healthcare industry is at a tipping point of major transformation? So viewers say yes, no, or you don't know. And Angela, we got a question. So Ronen, you answered one of the questions from the viewers regarding where the emphasis will be in the future, prevention or cure. And obviously you deal with prevention, and obviously, Angela, your product is more in cure. But I think, Angela, I'd like to ask you, and the viewers want to know, what type of health tech will we be using as a commonplace in 10 years' time? And as someone that is developing a product, what do you think would be something that we're all going to be using and today as a novelty?
We used to see a lot of technologies so far in the areas of diagnostics and remote monitoring, and gradually we get used onto it that these kind of things are a new normal of what should be done in terms of the healthcare outside the hospital walls. The next leg would be to serve a real treatment at the point of patient. We wouldn't talk about the point of care, but the point of patient. And I guess such kind of trends like self-care, so the technology where which introduce greater patient engagement, would actually take the main lead in the healthcare. Definitely, we wouldn't avoid the hospital presence in our life for very complex procedures like surgery, but the huge component and the percentage of interaction between the patient and the physicians may be done in a whole different way, and very big component of it can be done by the patient itself. And I guess that the self-care and the, for example, I can tell from our own experience, we take the expertise of in the area of the respiratory, and today we introduce onto the healthcare the only device that enables usual caregiver, like a real bystander, to administer respiration out of the hospital. So today, a device is able not only to monitor the vital signs, to transmit the vital signs to the remote dispatcher and make the surrounding more safer environment, it actually delivers care at the point of patient. So that's where we'll see a smart city also play a huge role in synchronizing different components in the healthcare. And we might see the convergence of many entities that engaged in care as a result of the pandemic. And it's really not as surprising that in order to make a huge transformation, you have a policymaker inside, you need the whole national attention onto it, and then you are able to make it in a different way. So that's, I believe, we have to see in the long run.
I see. And Dominic, on the healthcare side, you have a wider view. Do you feel that medicine at large will be moving more towards prevention as opposed to cure? Will the balance change? Because we've all been doing a lot of prevention in the past year. Do you feel that this is something that is here to stay? Maybe the entire professional medicine is going more preventive than as opposed to cure?
Yeah, what we see now is, up to now, hospitals and also in the last years, healthcare sector was more a little bit like emergency medicine. We are waiting up to the crisis, and when we intervene, when we go in, for example, by a heart attack and go into surgery, we make a repair. And I think there will totally shift to self-care. I can do a lot of stuff with prevention. We have an aging population, and the aging population wants to age very healthy. And so in case we cannot address this, the topic prevention, it will be extremely expensive to keep the healthcare sector on this level. So we have to change it to prevention, and it's able to change it. The second thing we probably will see is a shift away from hospitals into the houses of the people. We can do a lot of stuff now in the houses. For example, we can a dialysis procedure we can accomplish at home as home dialysis. Respirator therapy I can do at home, and the whole monitoring process. And for example, we have a large telemedicine center here. We are taking care of patients all over Germany. It's going to the north of Germany because there's a shortage of doctors. So I say my thinking is we will do a lot of more stuff around the people in the households, and probably they no longer will be patients. They are more civilians who want to age very healthy. And so prevention is a need, but also to bring the stuff to the people. And probably we will see less beds in hospital in the near future. So on the other side, if you are running a hospital, you have to think about networking. You must think about integrating telemedicine, patient monitoring to the stuff you have to bring to the people, because otherwise you probably will lose your position in the healthcare sector. So I totally would agree with all Angela said up to now.
Yeah, so following up on that, because obviously prevention is something that also reduces load off the healthcare system as opposed to cure. And the viewers add a question to that also for the healthcare system, how digitization will change staff shortages and overload within the healthcare. Are you going to combine these two technology strategies and healthcare strategies, prevention and digital? Will that reduce the load in combination?
I mean, we have a shortage of highly qualified nurses and also doctors. Artificial intelligence probably can take over some tasks easy tasks from doctors and also nurses. And in case we are able to establish this by especially technology around people, maybe this can also be an answer to the shortages we are facing now. So I also would agree with this extension regarding the use on the other side. When we are not able to use digitalization and technology, we will lose our quality of care. So in case you keep the quality or you want to keep the quality high, you must adapt all these technologies and digitalization. Otherwise, we will lose the thing.
Yeah, I also would like to relate onto this because we just going onto the phase where the healthcare system would realize the massive amount of selective procedure that have been canceled due to the pandemic and the necessity of in tools to compensate on that. So in terms of operational resilience and also financial recovery, it wouldn't be other way but do adopt digital tools in order to being able to increase capacity in a required scale. And we are keep communicating still these days with a lot of countries, and we can see a lot of chaos still going on, and it's absolutely different in terms of developing countries, definitely due to the lack of resources, like Dominic just mentioned before. But I can tell you that people learn from each other and they share the experience, and that's something I believe we couldn't see before the pandemic. The openness of the entire physician communities to share the thoughts, not only the thoughts, but actual practices, and to try to implement different ways of operation. So that's something very unique that happened in the ability of people to be attentive to others' experience, either onto the bad, onto the good side.
Right. So I think that was a very strong closing argument. We are getting closing in on the event. We have like a minute and a half to go. And I think we can summarize that both the private sector, the developing product sector, and the public healthcare sector have both been very highly impacted by COVID-19 on the way things are done, the way things are being developed, how you change the organizational way of thinking. And then you talked about bioconvergence as a strategic tool to be used in developing new products. And Angela, you brought in the new marketing and focusing technologies of how to use a specific product in changing circumstances. And Dominic, you gave us the overview of how a healthcare system addresses the way things are rolling in, so to speak, because you had them rolling in, and the use of staff and new technologies and how regulation affects you as well. And it seems like, and the viewers here that had a free text question running too, had a very resounding opinion that we're at a tipping point. And I think the tipping point really is at the systems themselves, the trenches, so to speak, the hospitals and the developers, and everybody seems to be looking at a new way of doing things. Wouldn't want to say anything on behalf of the governments and how they do things, but I believe changes will be met there as well. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. I want to thank Dominic, Angela, and Ronen. This was a very stimulating discussion, a very fresh way to view innovation in tech and in healthcare. And we all invite everyone to follow Leaders Live on future events, and we're going to be having more of these. This is the beginning of a series, and I think life in general is only getting more and more interesting. And again, in general, the healthcare within that life is always the most interesting part. So thank you, everyone, and stay healthy. Keep safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.